APIs will become more and more important and very useful for us Wi-Fi engineers, but they can be intimidating if you've never used them. So in this series of episodes, I'm introducing how the Mist API work by creating very simple Python scripts. So we will go over the Mist API documentation, explain the code, and then we will run this script together so we can study the results. If you like this content, please give the video a like and consider subscribing if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming video. Thank you very much, and let's get started. So in this episode, I will show you how we can create a very simple script to list all the SSIDs configured under one specific Mist site, right? So all the WLAN profiles. So what we'll do first is I will show you the results. So I will run the script, show you what I get from the script. Then we'll go to the API documentation. I'll show you which API call I'm using, and then we'll dive into the code so I can show you exactly how I created that mini script. Okay, so let's get started. Let's take a look at the script and let's run the script. Okay, so here I'm back in my terminal, and in this folder I have my script, which is list-wlans.py, and I have my config file, right? So just like in the previous episode, what I do is in my config file, that's where I put all the variables that might change from one script to another, and I'll show you exactly what I have in this config file in a little bit. And the list -wlan.py has all the Python code. Okay, so let's run the script and see what we get. It should list all the SSID that I have under one specific site that I have configured in my configure.json file. Okay, so I'm going to do Python list wlan.py, and then I feed my config file as an argument to my script, and I run it, and here it's listing all the different SSIDs. You can see I have 6 SSIDs. You have the name on the left. I'm retrieving the ID as well from the API call, and I'm also retrieving the status. Are they active, inactive? In this case, they're all active, right? In an upcoming episode, I will show you the script that I used to actually create those different sites, so you can see how that works as well. Okay, so let's go to the API documentation. So if you go back to, if you ever wonder how to get to the API documentation, if you log in into your dashboard, you can head over in the right-hand corner here, and you have something called API documentation. It will take you to the API documentation. Here, the section we'll use to retrieve the API call that we'll need to list all the SSIDs will be under site and under WLAN. Okay, so if you click here on WLAN, you will get this base URE, right? And you have an example right underneath it. If you run this, it will get and retrieve all the WLAN profiles. It's that easy, right? So if you do if you send a get request with this as a URL, right, or URE, it will go and retrieve the different WLAN. Here they show you, a result, so you can have an idea of what the result would be. But that's pretty much what I'm using in the script. Okay, so let's go back to the script. Here on the left, I have my script. So you see I have 3 different functions. And here on the right, I have my config file. Okay, so I will start by going over the config file. Here in this case, you don't need a lot. All you need is, obviously, you need your credentials to make the API call, so your token. You need your org ID because it will be requested inside the API. Actually, in this case, I'm not sure the org ID would be used, so we'll go back and see. And here I always keep the Mist URL for the API, so I know it's there, and I can retrieve that information when I make my call. And here what will be important is this guy here, the site ID. We will need the site ID to retrieve all the WLAN profile of a specific site. Okay, so that's the key information we need. We don't really need the name. I've added the name here just so I can print a pretty message at the end, but we don't really need the name here. Okay. If I go back to my script, As you can see, I have 3 functions. The first one here, it's really to check if you have a main function, and then it will run the main function. And here, all I'm doing is I'm pretty much, counting how long it takes me to run the script. So that's pretty much what I have here. It's nothing very crucial. It's just something I like to have here. So it tells me exactly how long it takes to run the code. If we go back to the script, you see how it tells me at the end, time to run. And that's pretty much how I do this. Then we're going to have the main function. So in the main functions, I have my arguments. So here, as you could see when I run the code, all I'm giving as an argument is that JSON config file, right? So I'm just making sure the user is providing that config file. And then what I do is I load that config file into a config Python dictionary, and then I can feed that dictionary to my function, my list WLAN function, and I can retrieve pretty much all the data I have in my JSON file, config JSON file, back into my Python code. Okay, that's just something I do for my script because I find it's easier. And then if I want to mess, or if I want to rerun the script with different values, different parameters, all I have to do is mess with my config.json file, right? Let's say I want to do it with a different token on a different site. I can just mess with it in this config file. And then what I'm doing is I'm creating another Python dictionary here, and then I'm pretty much executing the function, the list WLAN function, and then this function will make the call, retrieve the different WLANs, and then create a dictionary of all these WLANs, and then put it inside this variable. So if later on I need to reference any of them, I would have them in a Python dictionary. Okay, so let's take a look at the list underscore WLAN, which is the main function here in my script. And here you'll see that I put some comment, and the call we're going to make here would be this one. So we're going to make a get call, because all we're doing is really retrieving information from mist. So we're going to send a get call, and then this is going to be the URL. So as you can see in the URL, we have to specify the site ID. So actually here we don't need the org ID. All we need to specify is the site ID. And so this is the site ID I have right here in my config file. Okay. Then we need to prepare our API call. So we need 2 elements here. We need the URL, and we need the headers. Okay. So just as how we did it in the previous episodes, in the URL you prepare your URL. So here we have the template at the top. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here. I'm creating, the first part will be the mist api.mist.com/API/version1, and this is exactly what I have here in my config file under API mist URL. So that's what I'm getting here, config API mist URL. Then I will append, site / then I need to go and get my site ID. Right, so my site ID is under configurations, site ID, right here, configuration, site ID, right? And then I will append /WLAN, okay? And here I have my URL ready. For the headers never change in our cases for all the simple scripts that we do. What we have to specify is the content of the file, or the type of the content we're expecting. Here would be JSON, so the Mist API will respond with a JSON format. And then we need to specify our token for the authorization, and you can see that my token, I have it under my config file, under API token. So if I go to my config file, I have API token, and then here I have the token that I can use to authenticate myself towards the Mist interface. Okay, so this is pretty much what I'm doing here. And then here I can make my API call. So I make the API call. Since it's a get API call, you see it's request. So it uses the request module here that I have imported. And then I'm making a get. And then I specify the URL, and I specify the headers, the 2 that I have just defined right above. Okay, and then it will make the call. And then I put all the response inside this response variable. I create an empty list that I call my WLAN here. And then I check if the response status code is 200. This means that everything went well. If everything went well, what I do is I will unload the content of the response. Go back to the documentation. You see that in the response, this is what you'll get. And what you'll get is pretty much all the different WLAN in a JSON type of format. So what you can do is you can unload this JSON text into a Python dictionary using this JSON.load function, right? And this is straight from the JSON module that I have imported here. So I can unload all that content into my WLAN, which is a Python dictionary, okay? And then what I can do after that is I can do a loop. So I can do a loop on all my WLANs, right? And I will call each iteration WLAN. And then here I will see the line you see here is I take my list and then I add a new element in that list, right? So every time I loop on all the SSID that we have in the site, I will add a new element in my own list. And then in this list, I will add 3 parameters: the SSID of the WLAN, the ID of the WLAN, and the fact if it's enabled or not. Okay, so if it's enabled, I will have true. If it's disabled, I will have false. Okay, and then I print, and here I use something new that I haven't used yet in this series of episodes. I use a library that's called tabulate, and tabulate helps you to print out some pretty tables, very simple tables when you do Python scripts, right? So that's what allowed me to have a nice, format here where I have titles, headers, and then I have each element of my tables in specific row. Everything is aligned together. So what allowed me to have this was the tabulate module. Okay, so what I do is I use a tabulate to format what text I'm printing out to the output, and then I'm feeding my list. So I'm feeding my WLANs, right? And then I specify my headers. So that's where I specify SSID ID active, SSID ID active, right? And it will loop on my list, right? And then for each element in my list, it will create one row and then populate the data. Okay? If everything is okay, I return the list of WLANs. And then if something went wrong, I can print the status code of what went wrong. And then I can print a message saying that there's no there's no WLAN in that specific site. Okay, let's say we didn't find any WLANs or none of them were specified. You'll get a nice message saying that nothing is specified. And then I return my list, which would be empty at this point, right? If the list is not empty, we're returning here. If we go all the way at the bottom and we end up returning the list will pretty much be empty. Okay? So that's pretty much all that's going on here. It's a simple get URL call, and we're getting all this JSON code back from Mist, right? And then we can analyze this code and we can pick and choose the data we want. So in my case, I just decided to pick SSID, ID, and enable, but you could decide to take other information. And then I print it out on table, nice table, and it's giving me the view I was showing you here. So it's just giving me the SSID name, the ID, and active. Okay? So let me show you the actual result, the full JSON text that we get back from Mist. So here I added a line here, right here. I just added this to print out the content of WLANs, right? And you'll see that, let's try to see if it works. Yeah, so you'll see that when we execute the script, it will pretty much show us the content of the response, of this response.content.decode, right? And what we're expecting to see is the JSON file of all the different, that includes all the details of all the different SSIDs we have in our site, okay? So if I go back here and I run the script again, you'll see that I will get, so obviously at the end I have my table, right, nicely formatted, But right before that, you see that I have all the data I have received from, missed when I sent my get request, right? So we're sending a get request, so we're expecting something back. And here we're getting pretty much a JSON, text, and then one element represents one site. So here you can see all the variables that you have access to for one specific site. Like I said earlier, the one I'm leveraging here is SSID. So I'm using the SSID name. I'm using the ID. So I have the name of the ID. But you could check other variable. You could be checking the band. Is it a 2.4 or 5 gigahertz or both? So I could check the band. I could be checking, the PSK. Here you go. You guys know the PSK to my secret Wi-Fi network, right? So, and you could see if it's a PSK type of SSID, is it an open SSID? You could get all of these, details when you look at here, right? So this is nice. I actually like to keep this. I'm actually going to comment it out and keep it in my script. I like to keep this in my script so I can study, what Mist is sending me back, and then I can pick and choose what I want. In this case, let's say we want to add something. We're going to do it on the fly here. I'm going to add the band. So I'll do here band, right? And then what I'll do is I'll add a column here that I'll call, I'll use the same format. I'll call band, right? So we'll save this and then we'll run it again and see what happens, right? And here you go. Now we have a new column in our table that says band, and then we have all of these guys are on 5 gigahertz because I created them on 5 gigahertz. But if I had, some SSID on both frequency band, would have both. And if I had some on 2.4 only, would have 2.4. All right, so that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you guys like the content. Once again, if you like the video, please give it a like. Consider subscribing if you want to see more of those simple scripts. I'll be posting more in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.